The subject of today's video is a true British icon. When the prototype first appeared in September 1954, I think few would have been able to predict how long-lasting their creation was. Whilst no longer operating daily bus services as it was designed to do, the Routemaster is a common feature at weddings or vintage fairs, or pretty much anything that needs an old bus. But beyond that, its design adorns London merchandise for the last 7 decades, and itself has become synonymous with London transport. So whilst the channel primarily focuses on aircraft, with the occasional bit of armour or something different, I did feel that the 70th anniversary of the Routemaster bus was substantial enough for me to find a kit of it. Okay, actually I found a kit first, second hand, and thought, hey, might as well make a video, and now's as good a time as any. So in this video we're going to be taking a look at a kit of the one and only London Routemaster bus. And the kit in question is this, the Keil Kraft London Country double-decker bus, aka the Routemaster, 1/72 scale, modèle réduit en plastique. Now perhaps these days people are more familiar with the 2011 Revell 1/24 scale Routemaster, and maybe if my budget was higher and skill was also higher, I would have gone for something like that. But no, I saw this available second-hand, actually from Hatton's, just before they closed. They were selling off a load of things cheaply, and I picked this one up from here and thought, you know what, it's 1/72 scale, it's a vintage kit, it's something a bit different, let's go. Taking a look at the box first, you have this diagram of a London Country Routemaster bus, actually an RML, as it says there, RML. The scale, brand, and there's not really much else apart from some old sellotape. And on the back, it's exactly the same information but without the stray sellotape. On these edges we just have other kit available from Keil Kraft, so an Edinburgh Standard tram, open top B-type bus, and a red Routemaster London Transport rather than London Country. And on this we have some multilingual information, including the fact that it says it has 81 pre-coloured parts. There we go. On one shop edge we have the kit number K325, and we have this old sticker which suggests it was $7.95. And on this side we have the label from Hatton's, which obviously would have been for them in store. There isn't really much else on the box, to be honest, so we just need to open it up and see what we've got. Right, so everything is in this opened plastic bag. Right, we'll look at the plastic shortly, but first we have an instruction sheet, and presumably, there they are, some decals. Who remembers buying big bargain returns on Outback tickets? I have no idea what that is. I'm guessing it's some sort of scheme that London Country had. Who knows? But yes, these look rather crude, if I'm honest. We have some sort of logo on the side, or not logo, advert for something on the side. We have front and rear, as it says here, front and back, just destination blinds and numbers and things like that, as well as the sides here. They do look nice, but they do also look hand-drawn, so they look a little bit rough around the registration plate and things like that. The London Country looks good though, nothing wrong with that at all. Anyway, we'll see. This is quite an old kit, as you'll learn shortly, so not entirely confident that I will use them or they'll be any good, but we will have to wait and see, won't we? Instructions are this single sheet of paper. The right side, I was going to say starboard then, but it's a bus. The right side of the bus here, glue windows in, quite cluttered. The left side over here, and then assemble the bus from there. It's very indicative of this era of kit. You just sort of work it out yourself, basically, or it's written down. So here, so cement in place, all windows, cement past 23 and 24, etc., etc. So that's part one, and that's part two. Not much of a chassis, is there? By the looks of it, it's just the body, and there we go. Anyway, colour paint guide. They recommend the use of Humbrol paints or Gunsanyo acrylics. Is that how you say it? Gunza? Anyway, we've listed the Humbrol colours needed to paint your model. They suggest Humbrol Satin Green number 131. Yes, having looked it up, that is about as close as I can find currently, but one of my jobs shortly after this is to see if I can find something better, along with better transfers, potentially, just in case. It also tells you what pattern the seats were, which I think is quite nice. And rather than a call out for the transfers, it just tells you where they go. So yes, have fun with that. I would recommend using photos as a guide. Anyway, not much else we can deduce from that. So let's look in the bag. Well, this jumbled mess is the kit. Okay, where to begin? I suppose the one bit which is obviously missing, which I had in my hand the whole time, it is a clear sheet of windows. You can see they have moulded a raised edge, a raised rib for the opening portion of the windows. And holding up to the light, you can also see that they've moulded in what looks like the windscreen wiper for the cab windows. At least I assume that is what that is. There are also some small circular ones that I assume are lights. But yeah, they look fine. I'm now going to get them out of the way. They do look a little bit foggy, actually. I say they look fine. There's no flash or anything. They just look a little bit thick. We'll see. Right, starting in no particular order, we have a black sprue that I believe is C. It says C there. This is one of the decks, the top deck, I assume. All of the seats are moulded on. We have this planking effect, which actually looks really nice. See that? Very, very good. We have what I assume is a drive shaft, but it looks very bent. Oh, no, it's not. It's two parts. Okay, that's slightly better. Got two parts here. Don't know what they are. We'll work it out as we go. This, I assume, are the wheel arches. That was bad grammar. This are arch. There we go. This are arches. Lovely. I'm moving this to one side as I go through. As you can see, it's a little bit chaotic. We have a load of wheels. And two that have seemingly fallen off. And is that 3 axles? Looks like 3 axles to me. Excellent. Plenty. The next black one then, we have a staircase. Ah, yes, excellent. Health and safety approved. As well as the lower deck, there's the driver's position. And the seats that go over the wheel arches. More of that planking effect down here as well. Very nice. A few other odd black parts. Don't actually know what they are, but, well, they'll be in the instructions, won't they? Oh, I went to pick it up and the front fell off. We have that bit. I'm guessing that's the front of the bus. If anyone tries to insult you by saying you look like the back end of a bus, well, it could be this bus. There's the roof. Now, you may already notice that there's a lot more flash. Oh, here, it's B. Sprue B, apparently. A lot more flash on the green sprues. You've got a lot of this here. It doesn't affect any part, but it is there. The handrail, which really should probably be replaced with some wire or something. I don't know if I can be bothered. There's the front, the radiator with the headlights. And again, there's the front there. It looks alright. Nothing wrong with that so far. There is a steering wheel. Useful for steering your bus. Then we have the left side. Actually, really nice detail. Very finely moulded. And the right side. Interior detail, there isn't any. It's smooth. But otherwise quite nice. This was just a spare bit of feed that was attached to the side of the bus. And then here we have the other parts that have unfortunately fallen off of the sprue. That just looks like flash. That one there. Not sure. There we go. And there we go. And that jumbled mess is that. So without further hesitation, let's get to building this thing. According to Scalemates, the original tool date was 1967. This particular version dates to 1989. I do find that Scalemates is a little bit unreliable when it comes to older tools, so I don't know if that is correct. If anybody does know, then by all means drop a comment below. When it comes to parts, I usually look at the box or in the instructions, or last resort, count them. Well, here, because there were quite a few parts that had broken free, I didn't do any of those things. There's quite a few parts, but there's also quite a few that are not for this particular version, such as, for example, there's a third axle, and keen-eyed amongst you may notice there are only 2 here. 1 decal scheme, and for the price, it's a second-hand kit, hasn't been available for a very long time, therefore I can't really give you a price, so a few bob second-hand. I think this one actually cost me something like £4, but yeah, not much. Anyway, onto the build. The first step is to repair the damaged left side of the bus, and I assume it was broken at some point in the last, 3 and a bit decades that this is likely to have been around. And weirdly, I'm then starting with painting. So everything is primed in this Halford's white primer. This is actually what I do to almost every one of my models. However, I very rarely show it. The lighting here is a bit strange and, well, I don't really want to get primer on my camera lens. But hey, never mind. The Tamiya Fine Surface Primer Red was then used for the interior. You'll see why as we go. I did some research into the best colour for the bus, and the general consensus is Humbrol number 131. However, I don't really like that, so I've gone for this Vallejo Fern Green 70.833, which is at least a similar sort of shade according to the pictures that I looked at. The reason why I didn't want the Humbrol one is because I don't like their acrylics, and everything else is enamel, so the very few colour match paints out there tend to be enamel. And I guess you can get some rattle cans as well, but I didn't want that. So whilst looking in a local model shop, this colour stood out as being more or less right, and being Vallejo, I can just thin it down with some Vallejo thinner and chuck it through the airbrush. So at this stage, anything which is an exterior panel was primed in white and then sprayed with the green before moving onto the interior, which was painted in this Vallejo Model Air RLM 23 Red. This, of course, is an airbrush ready paint, so again, just poured straight into the airbrush and sprayed. The interior detail is described in the instructions. However, the best way to understand what they look like is to either go to an actual Routemaster bus, there's plenty of them around, or of course find photos online. Just be careful because a lot of restorations may not be accurate. And so far as I could tell, the London Country Green ones were the same interior as the London Transport Red ones. Leather brown was then used. Again, it's a model colour, so it's brush ready for the decking. This is supposed to be a dark wood colour. Sometimes I've seen this as grey in buses, but I prefer the wooden colour. And the detail, as you can see here, as I mentioned in the unboxing section, is actually pretty nice. So I kind of wanted the interior to look respectable, given that the moulding, again, this is, as you saw, this is just one piece, the moulding is actually really, really nice. It's actually the quality of this moulding that led me to a lot of the choices that I made with this build. This is not a straight out of the box build. Whether the end result was worth it or not, well, we'll discuss that at the time. But because of the nice detail of the moulding, I did decide I'm going to upgrade some of the features of this kit. And in addition to the interior, we've got the roof. It's very, very smooth. And an actual Routemaster bus roof is not smooth. It's a selection of large panels over each other. They overlap. There is a definite ridge. Now, rather than try and rebuild the entire thing, I'm using this styrene strip. I've blue tacked, as you can see, the roof to the side, or one of the body sides, and then I'm drawing roughly where these strips would be, showing the joins of the aluminium roof. And then the strips can be glued in to represent some sort of a strapping or join or weld line or whatever. Although it was a bit fiddly to try and do this in front of a camera, so you'll just see me there lining it up, and then that is glued on and then rubbed down with some sanding sticks afterwards. We then move to step one of the instructions, which is the windows. This is a little confusing. I mean, it didn't take me that long to work it out, but it says, for example, 8 times and then this number, but there's only 7 of them because they've carried 1 over. And this is the order that you glue them in. Some of them have frames because they have opening windows, and other ones don't, so obviously they're not opening windows. But Humbrol Clearfix out, and it is a case of cutting out all of these windows. I did one side at a time, lower deck first, then top deck, and running some Clearfix around and gluing them in place. These are flush fitting windows, which, considering the age, I think is pretty good. However, I really struggled with these. The Clearfix just left no real strength to it at all, and I kept finding that they were being pushed in. So I made a choice which you will probably see the results of later. So I actually used Tamiya extra thin cement to do the vast majority of the windows, which you'll see the results of later. So the interior then, I have painted the seats red. There's an aluminium strip, kind of a kickboard thing, and where there'd be a railing as well, that goes on top of the seats, a little grab rail, and the floor has been washed. Everything's been given a wash of the Citadel's grey wash that I use for everything, and then we can start assembling. Now, the interior, as I mentioned earlier, is quite nice. It's a nice moulding, and the paintwork is done as per the photos that I could find. So we've got red in line with the seats, so below the windows. Then you've got an aluminium frame. Then it's white for a little bit, or cream, depending on the bus. And then it's the same at the top deck. But because there's no way of knowing where that top deck is, I have to stick this front piece in, then draw the line, and then mask over it so that the top deck can have its red sprayed again over the white. You can also see on the right-hand side of the bus, you've got the stairwell, of course, so the red is sprayed there. I do think the red that I chose is a little bit on the light side, although often in cases like this where you've got an enclosed box that you can only really see through slightly foggy windows, having a slightly lighter colour actually works out really well because, of course, there's a bit of a shadow. The next improvement made was to the top deck piece. So again, moulded all in one piece, but there is no divide between that and the lower saloon, meaning you can see all of the indentations left by the seats. I didn't really want that, and I thought if you peer in the door, it's going to look a bit silly. So I got this white sticky label to provide a thin layer over the top of all of those holes. And as a bonus, it means that the ceiling of the lower saloon will actually be white, which is much better than the black with holes than it otherwise would have been. Now, because of the length, it took 2 labels, as you can see, so it's just a case of sticking it all on and then cutting it out with a Kraft knife, and done. And we're now finally at the point where the bus can come together. The instructions recommend sticking the lower floor, which also forms the bottom of the bus, to the left side. That's because that bonnet piece that had fallen off that I glued back at the first step, that lines up with the front compartment bulkhead, so that's the back of the driver's compartment or the front of the bus on the passenger side where there's an overhang. That lines up with the floor, and then you can glue everything from there. I mentioned that I wanted to add more detail to the inside, and this is that step. I'm using a bit of guitar string because, hey, I have tons of spare guitar string lying around, just trimming the ends off whenever I change a set, for example. And these are used for the vertical holds or grab bars or whatever they are called, which, again, I based on photos. And then the staircase can be assembled as well. This was a little bit tricky, and it just took a lot of trial and error working out what they were actually trying to say. Because, again, the instructions aren't overly clear. I also had to be careful not to knock out any of those grab bars that I had glued in, because as you can see, the top deck has now gone on, but that was required just to line the stairs up neatly. But it was nothing that a bit of patience and trial and error and dry fitting didn't solve, and this is the last opportunity you're going to get to see the interior of the bus, or at least the lower deck of it, and I think that looks alright. Yeah, the paint job is the most important bit, and the vertical grab bars just add that little bit of visual flavour when you peer through the windows. But with the right side and the back of the bus now completing the box, that's it. It's gone. It exists only in video clips and our memories. Well, normally, of course, the way that I make a video is I assemble the model and then I narrate it afterwards in post once I've done some editing. I don't feel that this is going to work very well this time, so even though I don't normally do it, I'm showing you mid-build a few things that I've done because it is proving very difficult to film. So firstly, the actual bulk of the bus, it has been involved in an incident. There should be some pictures on screen now. If not, I apologise. However, I accidentally dropped it and broke the windows around here, so this is now slightly rough. I have managed to patch it up. You can still see there are tiny holes. None of the glazing is broken, but there's now some fogging. Now, these are not very clear windows anyway, so I don't think that's a particular issue, but it hasn't quite come out how I would like. And I had to repair this window as well because I put too much pressure on it whilst trying to fix the other side. And it's just one of those things that, in hindsight, I probably should have prepared for, but never mind. The other issue that I am having is the front end here. The instructions are very vague and rubbish. You see, it just doesn't glue properly, but even if it does, even if I can get it to sit in, the bonnet just does not sit square. There's always a gap somewhere, either here or you run it flush, and then there's a gap there, which would suggest this is too far forwards, but there's nowhere else for it to go without creating a weird shape here. So that's a pain that I'm going to have to compromise, and I'm struggling to do it on camera. And this doesn't really have anywhere to sit either, so once they go on, like that, and like that, it just kind of vaguely sits on top. So there's going to be a joint. It's a bonnet. It's going to lift anyway. That's just how it's going to have to be. You can also see that inside there I painted black on the wrong side of that ridge, so that now needs to be painted green as well. On the plus side, the interior is looking nice. Oh, I've just pushed the front in again. See what I mean? It just doesn't stay. What I would like to have done is installed the handrail that goes up the stairwell. However, the way that this kit assembles, there's no way of actually really doing that without assembling the side of the bus first and then trying to put it in when it's at this stage, and I can't face doing that, so it's going to look a bit odd because it's got the grabs vertically on the bottom floor. I'm about to do the same on the top floor, but it's not going to have the handrail there. I will, however, intend, I'm saying this now, hold myself responsible for it if I don't in the finished product, put the main grab there between the floor and the roof. So that's the state of the body of the bus. Overall, it's all right. I mean, the windows are a little bit crude, but I'll see what I can do to tidy them up. But I just can't apply any pressure because there's just no way of really gripping them without ruining them. So that's that. And the next thing I wanted to mention was the roof. I should have already mentioned by now, but in case I hadn't, I've got the strips on here, just bits of plasticard to try and give an impression of the joins. But the front is clearly the wrong shape, and I have added some filler, just some green stuff, and sanded it to try and create more of a dome shape. You can see there, it looks better. I don't think it looks quite right. It's a little bit wonky on one side, but it's certainly better, and that will then go on here once all of the grab rails are on. It looks a bit odd that some of it is painted and some of it is not. That's because I decided to do this after I'd started painting and kind of gave up. So this will now be sprayed, so I'm just going to stick that down onto something, blitz that with green, see what it's like, fit these vertical poles, the grab poles, whatever they are, I don't know, then stick the roof on, and then it will be a case of trying to patch up the paint where the joins are because this did not fit together nicely. So anyway, that is a weird mid-build update from me. Let's see if what I've said now happens. Listening back to that whilst editing and obviously doing this narration, I think I sounded a bit deflated in that in that little bit. You know, the building of this kit wasn't as easy as I'd like. There's a lot of interpretation required for the instructions, and often it just put up a little bit of a fight, and then finally be at the stage where it's looking complete, it looks like a bus and you can see the end of the road, to then drop it. Yeah, it was a little bit heartbreaking. In terms of why it was damaged so much, it actually, when I say I dropped it, I did on the corner of the desk where it then spun a few times and landed on the floor. So yeah, everything that I said there I did later do. I did indeed do all of the vertical poles on the top deck, and you see me here just brush painting the white stripe that goes around in this colour. I did contemplate the idea of spraying it, and in the end thought, sod it. At this point, not going to lie, I was just looking to get the bus done. I didn't really care about much else. Also, of course, the wheels needed to be glued in, so these wheel arch pieces were stuck both rear and front, and then there's an axle with a wheel either side that goes in. If you do this properly, the wheels will be able to turn. I did not do it properly, and only one axle turns. What I think happened is when I stuck the body together, because I only used one side, I didn't line the sides up necessarily properly. I think there should actually be a tiny gap somewhere, and it means everything is just a tiny bit wonky, which, for the purpose of the axles, just throws everything out, and that's probably what the problem with the front of the bus was as well. So yeah, not ideal. Yes, I messed it up, but hey, it's a learning curve, isn't it? onto the decals, and rather than have any sort of diagram, you just have a list of where they all go, which is fairly helpful. The drawing on the box, of course, is the most helpful part of this process, as is the internet, but as I've said, there are so many variations of Routemaster now that if anything, you're overwhelmed with information and different interpretations that have happened and buses that have gone through their own lives and had their own tweaks on what was standard. So this was partly guesswork and partly just what I thought looked nice, but even though they're very old, the decals, absolutely fine. Not a single problem with any of them. And then with only a few tweaks to various things here and there, we are done. So let's take a look at the finished product. Okay, full disclosure, I don't really like this. I don't think I did a very good job, but it will probably end up sitting on top of a shelf, getting dusty, never to see the light of day again. The actual kit itself, I don't think is that bad. I think the problem is me, the way that I made it. There is obviously, as you can very clearly see, a lot of marks on the windows. This requires some very good clear glue, and I just don't really have any. The clear fix is way too thick and gloopy, but also the moment they are glued in, if you start handling the bus, they're going to just start falling inside, and then you're never going to fish them out. In fact, that's what happened to the rear window at the top. I was putting one of the transfers on, it says emergency exit, and a tiny bit too much pressure, boom, that's gone. Then I had to be very careful with tweezers and try and grab the window and glue it in from the inside, and it was just a bit of a nightmare. If this were brush painted, and you're just careful around the windows, I actually think it would have been fine, but because I wanted to airbrush it to get a nice finish, it somewhat ruined the end result, which I guess is sod's law, isn't it? You'll also notice that I didn't put the adverts on the side. That's not to do with the decals at all. They were fine. I just didn't want them. I just didn't like them. I thought it would make the model look incredibly dated, so I didn't bother. The colour, however, I think is fine. I think that looks alright. The front is definitely wonky. It doesn't sit on its wheels properly because of either, actually, because I had another thought, either the thing that I mentioned earlier about it not being quite in line, or I think the floor piece is actually a tiny bit warped and I just didn't notice it, but looking back at some of the footage, it does feel like it was a bit warped on one side and it's just lifted up, so that could have been a bit better. If I were to buy another one, I reckon I could do a half decent job on it, you know, particularly by adding things like the wing mirrors and the indicators, which, okay, it's 1/72, but they are noticeable in their absence, sure, we'll put it that way, and the railing to go up the stairs that I mentioned that I just couldn't find a way of fitting, that would also be a really good improvement. But the actual basis here are really well detailed sides, a pretty decent one-piece interior for each deck, and I don't think, considering how old this kit is, I don't think it's aged badly at all. I mean, just look at the interior detail. I just took these stills just on my smartphone, and it looks alright, you know, for the size of the bus. I think the interior really makes this kit shine. So yes, you know what? The kit, I'm going to say, is pretty good. My attempt at building it, I'm going to say, is subpar. Okay, thank you all for watching, and it's usually at this point in the video that I will be telling everyone to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and become a channel member like the people on screen. However, just for you, because it's something special, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sing a song about the virtues of channel membership. Be a channel member, definitely surrender, put your Mr. Kraft kit in a blender. Nobody watches until the very end of a YouTube video anyway.